Louis Mackintosh from the Scottish Socialist Party.
Thank you. I'm not really a public speaker, I have to say that straight away. Okay, it's not something I'm very used to. I'm not going to use it, I'm going to use my iPad because I've written everything down over here. An animal farm, George Orwell famously wrote, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Millions of workers strive only to remain through it. Pigs are growing fat, and only need to spend one day at work to earn more than a year's living wage. Most companies of the incomes earned by their top jobs add to those earned by the workers employed to generate their obscene profits. Just one example. Next Shop CEO Lord Wolfson last year grabbed £4.6 million for himself. That's 459 times more than the workers in Next. You should also remember that in Next they're paid a miserly £6.70 an hour, and 3 out of every 10 jobs in Next are for 12 hours or less per week. This condemns thousands of workers into perpetual poverty and leaves them at the beck and call of their profit-crazed employers. Of course, many big companies go the whole hog, and they exploit workers by only offering 0 hours contracts, the ultimate in low-paid casual labour. In 2015, the SSP is campaigning for a decent living minimum wage of £10 an hour. For many, the lines between the minimum wage and the living wage are blurred. A lot of employers don't see any difference. The minimum wage is legally enforceable by central government legislation and is set at the poverty-inducing level of £6.50 an hour. Profiteering employers welcome it, and they're more than happy to allow the taxpayers to subsidise their low pay through tax credits. The living wage is a product of research and campaign by the Living Wage Foundation and others. It's calculated at the bare minimum required for a basic standard of living and is currently set at £7.65 an hour. As the Scottish Socialist Party, we welcome the living wage, but it's flawed on 2 counts. It's too low to match the rising cost of living, and it's entirely voluntary. Employers are under no obligation to pay it. I know this because I'm a trade unionist. I've sat across the table from a corrupt organisation, recently found to be a corrupt organisation, and I bargained to introduce the living wage into our workplace. They would not even entertain the possibility of introducing it. What is needed is a legally enforced national minimum living wage, set at a level to guarantee a decent living minimum wage, which is why the SSP have always fought for such a minimum to be set at 2/3 the male median earnings. In today's figures, that's about £10 an hour. Labour is trying to appease the working class, who are deserting their new Tory agenda by promising £8 an hour minimum. But they try to hide the fact that they only aim at this by 2020, meaning it would barely sustain the current pathetic £6.50 rate when you account for inflation. The SNP say they support the living wage, and they have belatedly joined the call by the SSP for minimum wage levels to be devolved from Westminster to Holyrood. But in the SNP's case, they only say that it's at the level that it will rise by at least inflation. Based on the official inflation measures of today, that implies a paltry 13 pence an hour. If the minimum wage had kept up with the pace of directors' pay of the top 100 companies since 1999, it would be £18.99 an hour. The SSP is determined to make this issue the centrepiece of Scottish politics in 2015. We're demanding £10 now, not in 2020 or some distant date beyond that. The fact the TUC has voted to campaign for a £10 hour minimum wage for all workers with not a single union delegate opposing it has powerful potential force behind this battle. Join the SSP in the campaign for £10 now and to outlaw poverty and 0 hours contracts. We're all fighting against poverty and inequality. Meanwhile, in the House of Lords, they're arguing and complaining about the quality of their champagne, and they're demanding a bigger budget for their booze. We've only got to walk 2 minutes down the road there to get to our local food bank, and that's obscene. Thank you.
Okay, next up is Liz McDonald. I think a few of you know Liz.
Morning everyone, and welcome today for coming along. I am so delighted that you could make it on this frosty morning. And thank you to everyone who has donated to the food bank. These will be getting dropped off in 5 minutes or whenever we're finished today. I do agree with what you were saying about the living wage, and I'm so proud that Highland Council was one of the first councils to deliver it across the whole of Scotland. It is essential that workers are paid a decent wage for a decent day's work, and it is obscene that the working poor are dependent on food banks to eat, that old people can't afford to heat their houses, and that Danny Alexander voted to take us back to bomb Iraq. I'm in the process of developing a crowdfunding. Wait until Bang goes back. I'm in the process of developing a crowdfunding fundraising event to oust Danny Alexander and to elect an SNP MP. Yay! Unfortunately, we don't know who our candidate is going to be yet for the SNP, but we should know at the beginning of January, and then it will be full steam ahead. Some of the policies, I don't have an iPad, I've got a little bit of paper. Some of the policies that Danny Alexander has brought in, privatising the Royal Mail Service. Now in 2021, there's no protection for universal service delivery, so in the Highlands in particular, rural services could be stopped. And all Danny's electorate in the rural farmers in the outlying areas who are depending on their mail will have no mailman. There'll be no delivery in this area. I also think his supporting of the Tory agenda and the welfare cuts, bringing in sanctions for the poor and disabled, is just atrocious and disgraceful, and we must work so hard to oust him this time round. Yeah. I'm sure that this crowdfunding scheme will not only get support from people in Scotland, there'll be lots of people in England as well who are just as angry at his policies and want to see him shifted from his position of power. In his manifesto he said that he was fighting to get rid of the council. In his manifesto he said that he was going to get rid of the housing debt. That was one of his promises, and for the last 4 years he's been in a position he could do something about it, and although there's been repeated requests from Highland Council and myself as a councillor and other councillors directly, he hasn't done a thing. Now I think he's broken so many promises. He doesn't stand for me. I think what we need in Westminster is people who represent the people, who understand what it's like to live in this very difficult economic climate. And I hope that we'll get more people joining the SNP. I'm sure we've got, if not 100,000, pretty close to it by now. So, and I'm going along this afternoon to speak to the Radical Independent Committee, and I'm hoping that they will support the SNP. I met with Colin Fox, the leader of the Scottish Socialist Party, just 2 weeks ago, and he gave me his endorsement as a candidate for the nomination for the SNP candidacy. So I think bringing all these people from different parties together is the only way that we can beat Danny Alexander. We must all work together, keep the Yes momentum alive and going, and the volunteers that organised the table today on the food banks have done a tremendous job, and I'd just like to thank them all. And I see now we've got John Finney, one of our MSPs here, so would you like to say a word, John? There you go, John.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, Matt and I alluded to good morning, everyone. I think Les has said it all. What we do know, however things go with the general election, what we do know is each of the unionist parties are committed to continuing austerity. 60% of these cuts have still to come, and however they configure them, we know that it's the most vulnerable that are going to be affected by them. So what we do need to do is call Mr Alexander to task, because he's singularly failed this constituency, and he's, to coin a phrase from another Parliament in another era, he prostituted his principles for the ministerial mondeo. He really has been Tory boy, and of course all this false arguments that we see now between the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats, this is them building themselves up to an election. So I thought the most significant thing I saw in the change in leaflets, because every week I'd come home and there was a different leaflet through the door, the most recent one made no mention of the Scottish National Party, it made mention of this crusading Highlander who was down there fighting for the vulnerable people of the Highlands. Not quite how my mailbag, and I'm sure Liz and Collins reflects. That's not the reality it reflects. It is the most vulnerable have been affected, so we must get rid of Mr Alexander. That's the number one priority. Thank you.
Next speaker, Isla O'Reilly from the Green Party.
So I thought I was being usurped there by John, because as you know, John Finney is now a member of the Green Party as well. Although he's still an independent MSP, he is also a member of the Green Party. And I just wanted to say a little bit about the Green Party, because a lot of people don't really understand exactly what it is that we stand for, and that we are a proper political party. And we will be standing, hopefully, looking forward to the Westminster election, and then to the Holyrood elections, and then also to the council elections. And we really hope that the way forward is through local democracy. And the local democracy is something that we actually don't seem to have anymore. You think about the Highlands Council region, it's the size of Belgium. Now, Belgium has 589 municipalities. We have one unitary authority, which is completely ridiculous. So we see that real local democracy has to come through making sure that we have a voice locally, and that the only way for us to do that is to have councillors that are showing our views, or representing our views. And the Green Party is quite unique because it is part of a global green movement. It's not just a standalone party. It's part of this global movement, and all the Green parties around the world go by the same principles, and it's those founding principles that deem everything that we do. And we have a saying where you think globally but then you act locally. So you think about the global pressures in society, and then you try and make a difference locally. I love sayings. I always collect little sayings in a little book in my bag there. And my favourite one's from Gandhi, and it's be the change you want to see in the world. If you want something to be different, then you have to be different, and you have to make daily choices. And that, for me, what is being a Green is all about, is making those daily choices to make sure that my choices and my actions are those that are green. And the four founding principles of the Scottish Green Party is ecological wisdom, making sure that we live in a finite resource world. We need to make sure that we protect the environment and that the choices we make are sustainable. The second is for social justice. We need to make sure that everybody is respected, regardless of their sexuality, of their ethnic minorities, all these kind of things. Everybody has to be equal in society, and we live in a society which is completely not equal. We have this massive polarisation between the rich and the poor, and it's only getting bigger. That's something that really, really has to change. As I say, we believe in local democracy, so democracy is the third founding kind of pillar of our movement, and the fourth is in peace and non-violence. We believe completely and utterly that we should be a peaceful world and a peaceful nation where we have relationships built on trust and communication. We absolutely think that Trident should be abolished. It's a total abomination, and we shouldn't have it at all. And those are the four real key founding principles of the Green Party. there's massive support now. Like the SNP, we have grown hugely in Scotland and throughout the whole of the UK. The English Green Party have grown massively this year as well. Even in the Highlands and Islands, we have over 7 times more people now than we did before the referendum. So the referendum's really galvanised a lot of people, but it's really galvanised the Green Party as well, so that we can stand here before you and be a real political force and a real force for change. That's me. Thank you.
Michael McRae, Nairn Youth Alliance, is going to say a few words.
I feel like a bit like Jim Murphy here. No eggs. Okay, so why I'm standing here just now is because me and a few other people have formed what's called the Youth Alliance. This is a charity, well, hoping to be a charity. We are wanting to protect and preserve facilities that are provided to younger people in their local areas. Through just a few weeks of us researching, that is what we're lacking in the local areas for the young people, is things for them to do. The local council seem to be cutting these things all the time because not the majority of the people do not use these things. So why, if no one else uses these, well, we don't use them, so we're just going to cut them. For example, the skate park in Nairn, right? They spent I don't know how much money building the skate park, but they did not turn on the lights because it was costing them £1,000 a year to turn them on. Now, for £1,000, in my opinion, isn't much money for a year for running these things. Now, what's happened is the skate parks went into disrepair. People go down there to drink, they pee in the thing, so it smells. So people don't want to use it anymore. Same with the BMX track. It's easily maintained, but it isn't. It's in disrepair. I wouldn't send, if I had kids, I wouldn't send kids down there. I mean, there's glass shards all over the place. It's overgrown. It's unsafe. Things like this. This is what we are trying to prevent and protect, is things like these, so young people don't go out drinking because they have nothing to do. And that's what happens. I did it. I would go and play my PlayStation for however long. You get bored of that eventually, so you go out and you go out with your friends. What do? There's nothing to do, so you hang about the streets, you get people complaining because you're loitering about, and then you've got to disappear somewhere else, so you go down the river and then you drink because that's fun, adrenaline rush. Woohoo! So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get that adrenaline rush that you get from drinking, which is a big adrenaline rush, especially when you're underage, because it's illegal, and convert that into more positive things. Doing BMXing or mountain climbing or abseiling or kayaking, things like these where you do get adrenaline rush, exactly the same, but it's a more positive aspect of it. And we think that the Youth Alliance can achieve that in the future. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else want to have a go? The crate is still open. Yeah, just introduce yourself.
This is just a very quick one. It's basically just an advert for Women for Independence and Independence for Women, because it's a double-barreled name. Not aligned to any political party, open to any woman, because we're 52% of the population, but we're not represented by 52% in governments and councils and such like. So it's just an open forum for women to gain the skills and the confidence to speak about politics, to take action in politics. The main role it has is, I would say, is more or less educational. It gives women the opportunity to come together and just discuss in a way that women discuss things, because there is a difference between the way women discuss things and the way men talk about things. So it's a safe environment. There's very little allowed in the way of recording or cameras, because again, it's about building up your confidence and your skills to speak, to be able to stand on a box in your high street. And like I say, educational as well. I, for example, I'm going down to Glasgow in January because they've organised a training session with Margaret Cuthbert, the economist who writes in quite a lot of the papers, and she's going to sort of give us some basic skills on how to understand what the press write about macroeconomics, so that we can then go out and speak with our friends and our family. The kind of things they've been running is the kitchen cabinets, where you sit round the kitchen table with 3 or 4 people. The conversation cafes have been run. Locally, there's a group of us meet in the tapas bar in Inverness every couple of months and just have a coffee and a blether. So that's Women for Independence, Independence for Women. Look it up on the website. There's a Facebook page. Like, men can join the Facebook page, but you can't come to the meetings because you'd speak. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else want to have a go? No. Right, thanks folks, thanks for coming, and the Nairn Yes Alliance will continue with a series of meetings next year. We want to work with all the Yes parties and people of no parties and all the other organisations that have cropped up like Women for Independence. We have Rebecca here from Commonweal today, and you're planning a few things next year as well, aren't you? Yeah, so have a blether with Rebecca afterwards as well if you want to get in on creative stuff, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's about it. Thanks again. Thanks for coming. It's been a good turnout. We've got some food to take up to the food bank. It's quite incredible that 24% of children in Nairn live in poverty. You know, we've got to do something about that. We're not going back into the box. We're going to change that. We're going to carry on. We're going to fight for independence. Eventually it will come. But there's a lot we can do in this community in the meantime, and I look forward to working with all the parties and members of Nairn Yes Alliance. Do you want to have a go, Rebecca? Okay. Final speech and send off for the 2014 is Rebecca. Cheers.
Just from the Commonweal, we're very embryotic. We've only had 2 meetings so far, but it's basically about changing things as people for where we live in Nairn. We're planning to put on a William Gordon's Day. It was tried a wee while ago, a couple of years ago I know, and it didn't go very well without council backing, or so I was told. And we're planning on putting that on. So if anyone's got information about William Gordon, could give us a shout. I'll be going to the pub, so let me know. And I'll leave these on the table if anyone wants to have a look and see what we're doing.
Okay, Nolig Creel agus Blian of our Hern a Higgy. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year when it comes. Thanks everybody. Cheers.